By any measure, the new Segunda Beach Business Park has been incredibly successful. And it's not surprising, the location sold itself. Ships, trains, and the highway all within reach. Add in generous tax breaks, and it's no surprise that over 75% of the companies from the old park packed up and relocated here. And while that was happening, the city quietly scooped up sites as they became available. And now they've come for the rest. Using a mix of traditional land sales and a bit of eminent domain, the city has come to control the entire former business park, minus the aggregate mine. This is a big gamble, but both city planner Jack Norland and Mayor Beacon agree it's a risk worth taking. And that's because the land is inherently valuable. It has easy access to the Verde Coast Highway, direct access to downtown Segunda Beach, and sits about a mile from both City Hall and Lake Segunda. This would seem to be an ideal location for residential development, except for one thing. Significant portions of the site are incredibly contaminated. Fixing this will take environmental remediation. That means removing polluted soil, capping what remains, and filling in the hole with clean material. As you can imagine, this process isn't quick and it isn't cheap. And the city's on the hook for the whole thing because most developers won't touch contaminated properties. That means they don't have much money left to build the infrastructure that would make the uncontaminated portions attractive for redevelopment. Thankfully, Clearwater Southern's reached out. Led by Jamila Jones, they inquired about purchasing a portion of the site for a cargo terminal. She believes purchasing contaminated land gives them the leverage to build where it's cheapest, and honestly, she isn't wrong. The city jumps at the opportunity. And with funding from Clearwater Southern, the city can finally begin adding infrastructure in the uncontaminated areas while starting the long cleanup process. And this infrastructure will attract developers and generate revenue to support the remediation project. So in today's episode, we're to begin building this major expansion of Segunda Beach. We'll attempt to lay out everything in a logical and methodical way. Roads, cargo rail, public transit, and city services, we're doing all of it today. And we'll be sure not to poison the new residents by staying clear of the remediation site until it's completely clean. And if you're excited to redevelop an industrial site, hit the like button. And if you're more excited about developing this area in between the university and the new business park, hit the like button for that too, and let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Or just leave an emoji representing remediation for the sake of engagement. But before we jump in, the Respect the Topography hoodie is finally available at the City Planner Play store. It comes in both light and dark variations and features a beautiful all-over print design. And it's made in 95% recycled materials, so you can feel good about the clothes that you're wearing while also proudly proclaiming to the world that you respect the topography. And while you're there, be sure to check out our coffee mugs and beer glasses, along with other fan-made merch like the Verde Beach Metro map and this awesome Struggle is Rail mug. So head on over to cityplannerplays.com to grab yourself some sweet merch when you're done with the video. We're going to begin by laying out all of our major transportation infrastructure. That's all of our roads and all of our rail. This is going to be a big project and it's going to be highly iterative. So if I'm changing things along the way, know that it's all for the greater good and there is a larger plan in place. Now, our main goals are going to be to respect the existing infrastructure, upgrading as needed, but not completely wholesale changing things, as well as attempting to ensure that we have a roadway hierarchy that makes sense and that we're respecting the topography. So to begin, I want to come over here because I want to mirror the grid that we have in downtown Segunda Beach and begin to bring that into this area. So to do that, I'm going to try to grab this road right here and just extend it across the highway. But because we're working with really difficult slopes, I'm going to make sure that we have constant slopes selected. And then I use this road to create this frontage road. And now that I have this, I can come in at a 90. And come in perfectly square right there. Now, I think that we can go a little bit further over, but probably not a whole block. So I think we'll go to about right here, which appears to be the edge of the terrain where things start getting a little bit wonky, and that is not ideal. I had to make sure that constant slope was off for this one. This is a local road after all, so it's not a big deal that it's a little bit steeper. So now I want to make sure that we have the exact same block width, and it looks like it's 64 meters. So we'll mirror that over here. And I decided to pull this road over just a little bit so we have a nice intersection right here. And that's because I have a feeling that this is going to carry a lot of traffic, even though it's a local road. Now, to formalize our roadway hierarchy, I want to upgrade this road right here to have 4 lanes. And we've really got to do something about this. With that curve right there, this would be incredibly dangerous. And I feel like something like this would be a good compromise, still providing access to that arterial, but not too much and not around a curve. And that leads us to our industrial park. Now, the very first thing I want to do here is remove Industry Street, which is a frontage road. We're not going to have that anymore. And then I'm going to temporarily extend all of these existing streets basically over to the end of Lake Segunda State Park. And basically all of these roads are going to remain, save for a couple through here in our remediation site. But we'll fill this area in just a moment. I want to focus on this hillside area, which is going to be a really important area because it's going to be where our cargo rail terminal goes. Now, one of the ideal things about this location for cargo rail is it sits just a little bit higher, which means that we can maybe get the rail up and over the top of this arterial. So I'm going to use this line right here as the major delineator for this major rail terminal. And then knowing that there'll still be freight traffic up here, I'm going to be really gentle with my slopes. Now, I already know the train terminal that I want to place here. It's going to be the medium train general freight yard unelectrified, so I'm going to place this right away. And the main reason that I wanted to place this is I wanted to have this road behind it. I'm not 100% sure how I'm going to connect this into the rest of the network, but I definitely want to do it because freight vehicles can use this. So that might mean that we have some sort of a half interchange or something like that for this road, but that'll come at a later point in time. Now I want to build out the grid in this area. And the first thing that I want to do is make this an urban road. So I'm going to upgrade this to be a 4-lane arterial. And I think at this point, rather than necking down, I will upgrade this highway to also have 4 lanes, which will bring a little bit of continuity into Lake Segunda. Now, I've got to be really careful because I believe I have a rural power line here. I do indeed. And I think that Anarchy let me get away with one. That's the only reason I could upgrade the road. Now, I think ideally, we would basically apply the exact same grid that we have in the rest of Segunda Beach right here, but we're going to have to modify it a bit because we don't want to rebuild roads that already exist. So the first thing that I want to do is divide these really large industrial blocks in half. So that's about 122 meters, which we can't do. This will be as good as it gets. And there we have a fairly basic grid, but now I want to narrow it up. And I don't know that we're going to be able to divide this into that nice 64 we had before, but we'll do our best. And even though this looks like a grid, there's already a lot of irregularity in there because this is a redevelopment site, which I think is a good thing. Now, before we move on from here, I do want to take a look at pollution. And that's because we're going to eliminate all the roads within the polluted area. Now, there are a number of practical reasons I decided to do this. It will prevent me from making the mistake of zoning this area in, but it will also give me something to work around as I build some of this infrastructure, which I think is always fun. Now, the ironic thing is I said I wanted to maintain some of the existing infrastructure. Not possible. It's all in the contaminated area. So we've mirrored the pattern of that old infrastructure, but we've had to eliminate most of it, which is kind of interesting. And the last place I want to build roads is right here on this side of the hill. And there's not all that much that we can do. You can see that there's really steep grade right here. But what I want to do is wrap things around so that we have more connectivity. So I just want to find a place where I can gently come up the hill. And then I don't want this road to be that long without some sort of a reliever. So I'll build a road right here on the back side of these warehouses. I'm just focused on maximizing what I can zone here. And that's pretty good right there. So now I just want to build something out right here. This is not all that desirable, this property back here, but I still think it would be developed. And in my opinion, this is an excellent set of bones for our roadway network. So let's move on to building our rail. Now I'm going to level with you. The rail connection to this site is going to be incredibly challenging. And that's because of the infrastructure that we already have in place, as well as the terrain itself. Down here, we're at about 63 meters. Up here, we're at about 80. So we have to find a way to go from 63 meters to 80 in this small span right here. So what I'm thinking is we're gonna have a couple of bridges that go up and over the top of these arterials. Then we're gonna have a loop right here, go over the top of the rail, and then gain our elevation on the side of the hill. Now, I think ideally I would do this inside of the mountain, but tunneling is really challenging in city skylines too. I've actually attempted this portion of the build 10 times already, and I have not been able to get it right. So we're going to take a couple of liberties, and I'm just gonna make this as good as I can. So with all that said, I really wanna focus on the grade. I wanna make sure that our grade is 2% or less, which honestly is pretty extreme already for a freight train. So I'm going to begin by doing a bit of grading. And I'm gonna start out with a guide. I don't know that we're actually gonna keep this guide, but it will be where we begin. Now, the whole reason that I'm placing this is I'm going to create an elevated segment from here to this location. And that's 2.1% grade, which is just about perfect. Now, obviously the road is not quite right. I'm okay redoing the road. That would be done as a part of this project, which makes it completely reasonable for us to be redoing that. So now we need to gain our elevation. What I'm thinking that we're gonna do is turn on our ground leveling. I'm gonna grade back a little bit more and then try to gain that elevation. Now I'll turn on continuous mode, and I'm doing that because I wanna loop back around, but I wanna create a node for myself because that makes it really easy to create our loop. And now again, maximum 2% or so. And now I'm gonna turn off grounding. And then as I was placing this, I momentarily turned off anarchy so I could make sure that I could actually get over the top of this track, and it worked. So now before we move on to the next step, I wanna try to make this look natural, which is gonna be a little bit of a trick. So I'll ground level that, and then I'm going to carve in. This is not gonna be the height of realism, but it's the best that I can do in this situation. You know, and as I was thinking about it, as I was doing all of this grading, maybe it is the height of realism. Maybe they're doing all of this work and pushing all of this soil down into this pit. That would be very inexpensive relative to trucking it in from way far away. So we'll imagine that that's what they're doing. So now we've got to get up and over here. And once again, I'm going to set this to ground level, and we'll focus on making nice, smooth connections. Now for this next bit, we're going to need to use a little bit of eminent domain. And oh boy, after all of that, I have a feeling I'm going to unleash Myrtle. That was a lot of grading and a lot of eminent domain. But it's for the greater good because we're going to be able to send this to our connection over here now. But here's the thing. Even this is a real challenge. What I'm thinking that we're going to do is go underneath this bridge, sweep back around, and then go up and over the top right here. But look at the grades here. Oh my goodness. Just a challenge. So now I need to make these roads work, and you can see that the bridge is just a little bit too low. So we'll make this dive into the road, no problem. That resolved it really nicely, and then we have one more connection to make right here. Now, I'm going to level with you. That was a lot more rail work than I expected to be doing today, but honestly, I think it turned out really well, and it's going to function well too. Now, we've obviously got to make a connection to the outside world that way, but before we do that, I want to get this thing operational. So I'm going to create a route linking this station to San Martin Obispo. And then I just want to check the number of trains that we have on here and name it. And then I dropped the number of trains on here down to 2, but we are completely out of locomotives. And after doing a little bit of troubleshooting, it seemed like the issue was that we had one of those super long cargo trains blocking everything up right here. So I decided to swap it out for a normal Clearwater Southern train, and everything completely cleared here. And as a result, we now have trains available for this route. And look at this, there's already cargo coming to Segunda Beach. That is fantastic. And out of my own curiosity, I just want to see how smooth this route is. So let's take a quick ride down here and see if there are any lumpies and bumpies. And I'm going to be completely honest with you, that was about 100 times better than I expected it to be. There are obviously a couple of spots where we have trees poking through and where there are some jaggedy edges, but for the most part, that was pretty darn good. Now, for the other end of this, I think I'm going to leave this unfinished, kind of like I did on the other side. So basically, you'll get an idea of where we're going, but we won't quite get there today. And with that, our transportation network's in place. So let's move on to land use planning. I went a little bit overboard planning for this build, and that's because this is an absolutely massive area that's relatively disconnected from the rest of the build. In fact, this area is about the same size as Segunda Beach west of Segunda Beach Boulevard. So it's huge. But that massive remediation area means that we're relatively separated from Segunda Beach and we're not very close to Lake Valley. So if we aren't careful and we don't make this area self-contained and self-sufficient, the folks here are going to have to drive a long ways to get anywhere. So with that in mind, I decided that this had to be an area with a good mix of uses in its own downtown. And with that being the vision, I wanted to go back to the drawing board just a little bit on the transportation network and add in a couplet where our arterial is. And that's because I feel like that arterial really is the heart of this community, but it's also very imposing from a pedestrian standpoint. So by splitting this and turning it into a couplet, you create a more pedestrian-friendly environment. And while I was thinking about transportation, I also drew in this ramp to the back of our rail terminal. And now for this new district, I just started drawing in uses that I thought were appropriate, starting out with mixed use. And I want most of this district to be mixed use. Additionally, I want there to be a strong commercial corridor, a place where you could walk to a variety of businesses. So I added those as well. Then I added a couple blocks of office so that people could walk to things like a dentist or an accountant. And then surrounding all of those uses, a bit of medium density residential, with the idea being that we're transitioning from that neighborhood downtown into more of our residential uses. And surrounding those, single family uses, the exact same kind that we have in the rest of Segunda Beach. And now that I had the base of land uses, you can see that there are a number of holes here. Those were not always there. I did have these filled in at one point, but I decided to erase some of these so that I could add in some of the city service uses and some of the parks. Starting with parks, I wanted to add them to either end of the couplet, with the idea being that it'd be like a bookend to this area. A place where there are maybe festival grounds, or maybe even just a green space where you could lie down and read a book. In the very center of the district, I wanted to have a plaza, a place where maybe they have farmers markets on Wednesdays, or where they have food trucks during the workday. And then along the river, we're gonna have a fairly substantial green space. This will be a natural area with maybe a path going through it, nothing more than that. We're also gonna tie this into Lake Segunda State Park to make this whole area feel like it's a part of Lake Segunda. And I'll add a parking lot so this area can act as a trailhead as well. From there, I thought about all of the city services that this area would need. Things like elementary schools, post offices, a fire station, police department, clinic, and a high school. We're basically at capacity for all of these uses in the rest of Segunda Beach, so this neighborhood would need its own facilities. And I feel like the density that we have here would justify adding those uses. And in the future, they'll serve the remediation area as well. So wins all around. Moving to the other side of the remediation area, things get a bit more complicated. And that's because we have our Clearwater Southern facility over here, and it made me think that we probably need a bit of industrial over here. However, rather than having a bunch of heavy industrial, we're adding warehousing. And if you think about it, it makes sense. It's one of the few uses that would actually benefit from being this close to the rail terminal, while also not being disturbed by all of the heavy infrastructure in place around it. Moving north of there towards Segunda Vines and downtown Segunda Beach, I thought it'd be good to take the existing uses that are on the other side of the highway, the single family homes, and kind of bring those across the highway to blend these areas together. However, I had an idea. We've got this awkward parcel right along Segunda Beach Boulevard that I thought would make an excellent park space. So we're going to formalize that and make this a public green here, and maybe have a small playground or an exercise park inside of this, and then surround the whole thing with medium density, which might be row homes in this particular instance. Additionally, the area around the bend, which has really challenging terrain, well, that area also has excellent visibility, which would make it amazing for commercial. I could see something like a grocery store really thriving in a location like this. We're gonna have to do a ton of grading to make it all work out. And then we make our way over to our existing warehouse district. And this area is a little bit challenging. Much to the city's chagrin, adding this rail terminal only makes that warehousing more valuable, so it's not going anywhere. And as a result, it depresses the value of everything around it. But even beyond that, there are other things that make this area less valuable, such as its proximity to the highway, or the fact that Commercial Boulevard here is still going to carry a fair amount of industrial traffic. And that's to say nothing of our transmission line, which we'll probably bury as a part of this project. All of this is going to depress the land value in this area. And as a result, we're not going to go for high value uses. Across from the gas stations, we're going to have some more auto-oriented commercial uses. South of there, we're going to go for some small-scale offices. Things like an architect's office, an engineering firm, or even a planning office. Easy access is desirable, but you don't necessarily need to see it from the main road. If you're going there, you know why you're going there. And along the rest of Commerce Boulevard, we'll have more of those auto-oriented commercial uses. Things like diners, fast food restaurants, and gas stations. North and south of the warehousing, we're going to have some multifamily. These are going to be public housing projects. And bluntly, even though I don't love this location, I think it is incredibly realistic because the land value would be cheap. This area would probably have reasonably good bus access, and one could make the case that there's a close proximity to a number of jobs. And you might not like this area, but this sort of area exists all over the place, and I think it's important that we build it in Segunda Beach. Now, to try to improve this area, we will give a nice green space along the river, and we'll give them their own elementary school. And because the folks at the top of the hill are not going to want to attend this one, we're going to build another one up there as well. And then finally, I wrapped up by thinking about parking in the downtown area, adding a number of spaces there, as well as locations for landscape buffering around basically the entire site. But I basically want to add landscape buffers wherever there's a lot of noise, lights, or vibration. And anytime you have a lot of noxious uses nearby, I think it's a good idea to do so. And with that, we have the plan for our new neighborhood, so it's time to start implementing it, starting with our city services. We're going to be adding all of our city services from left to right, so I want to start over here. The thing is, many of these city services are actually off the couplet, so I'm going to begin by creating that couplet. So the first thing that I want to do is take Commerce Boulevard right here and downgrade it to be a 2-lane road. And then I'll draw on the other side of the couplet as well. And now I want to add nodes where the couplet's actually going to begin and connect. Now I think one of the places it'll connect is right here. The other is right here. So I've just brought that 4-lane road up a little bit further, and now I'm going to use the complex curve to make a connection. So let's select in the starting point, then I'll snap only to 90s because I want to select where I want the bend to occur, which I think will be right about here. I'll bring it up to where we're going. I'm going to turn snap to existing geometry back on, select that road, and then pull it to where I want it to end. And now I'll fix my directionality, remove this road to clean this junction up, and then unfortunately need to fix this as well. But that was simple enough. And then I just cleaned things up a bit to make things look a bit more reasonable. Now we can add our police station and our clinic. And I think for the police station, I want to go with the Chinese local police station, but this isn't going to fit perfectly right here. So I'll anarchy this into place and then make adjustments. That looks pretty good in my opinion. Now this is a good reminder though. I drew all of these plans on an iPad, so I'm not 100% sure if all of the assets are going to fit perfectly into the blocks that I've created. So if I need to modify things, remove roads, adjust roads, that's okay. It'll give the area more character, and it's just what we have to do to make things work. So now let's add our clinic. And according to our plans, that should go right about here. And this one does fit very nicely, so we'll just plop it in the block. And up here we have our high school site. Now, this is going to be an interesting one because we actually have to remove a number of roads for this. Basically all of those, and we might need to remove these as well. And I think I'd like to use the UK secondary school. This thing is quite large, and it means that we will have to decommission that road as I was thinking, and then take Brook Street and reorient that a bit as well. And that'll work out quite nicely. The only thing that I'm probably going to want to do is adjust the landscaping and the fences around here. You can see that it's going onto the sidewalks, but it's not a big deal. We'll add our own a little bit later on down the line. Our elementary school is going to have a fairly similar process. We have to get rid of this road right here. Now, ultimately, this parcel is fairly small, which limits our options. I think we're going to go with the Chinese Ruby Rock Elementary School, which has 800 capacity and should do well in this neighborhood. But ultimately, what I really like is that this is fairly small and fits into this parcel nicely. Now, what I don't like about this elementary school is that there's no playground equipment for the children. So I feel like we have to add a park to this. And I think I might go with something a bit more eccentric and go for this hilly playground. And then just remove elements of this that make it feel like a standalone park. And that looks pretty good. I just wanted to make sure that I removed the parking so that we didn't see cars driving up into what is the playground for this elementary school. And eventually, when we detail, we can make these feel like one cohesive site. Next, we're going to add in a post office right here, which is a fairly small parcel. Because of that, we're going to go for our Japanese post office, which is a very small building. And I'll situate it this way so that we get more of the building massing along this street, which I think would be the dominant street in this area, the collector. We also need a fire department right here, another small parcel. And I think this time we'll go with our vanilla firehouse. This should fit nicely in this location. And you know, as I look at this couplet, it's not quite fitting in with my plans, and that's because I think I drew it just a little bit incorrectly. So I'm going to try to make a fix. And there we go. That is much more in line with what I thought we were going to get over here. Now, the whole reason this is important is this right here is a park space, as is this over here. And we have a plaza that should be right about here, though I may shift that south a bit. Now, for the park on the right-hand side, I'm just going to plop down one of these small parks, and we'll eventually have that fill this entire area. For our plaza in the center of the district, I will plop a plaza, and that fits perfectly right there. I am very likely going to modify this, though, to give it more hardscape. And I think I'm also going to reorient it towards Cobblestone Street. And the reason for that is I like the idea of pedestrianizing this street straight through the center. The reason we're not going all the way down is we're going to have parking right here. In fact, let's place that now. And then finally, let's add this park down here at the end of Cobblestone. And I want to try to go for a large city park. And though this shouldn't fit, I actually kind of think that it fits perfectly. And I love that we can have people crossing right here to get to this park from the other side of the road. And then though we're not going to be placing a proper park for this area, this is a major green space. So I want to build this out as well. First thing I want to do though is place parking. I've just added some pretty basic gravel lots right here. And then I've got an idea that I'm not sure if it's going to work, but I want to see if I can use some of these wooden leisure piers as the path back here. So we're not using all of that pavement path. Now, the benefit of using this pier is that I just turned this entire thing into a park space, which means that we should start to see quite a bit of activity here in the future. All we've got to do is remove all of these trees because I placed this with Anarchy, and honestly, I think I probably had to. And as I look at this from this view, you can see that where the pillars are, it looks pretty strange. So I want to see if I just delete these with Better Bulldozer, that fixes it. So I will do that up and down this path. And this looks pretty good, but I've got one more idea. I'm going to flatten out the parking lots, which will lead to this looking pretty bad, but we can fix this as well. And we've basically made more justification for this entire structure existing. This looks so good and would be a gem in this community. And then finally, a couple more city services over here, including a couple of parking lots and one neighborhood park. And with that, the services for this area are basically in place. So let's turn our attention to this area, starting out with our rail yard. Now here's the thing, we're not really adding any city services over here, but I do want to build that structure right here to get into the back of the rail yard. And I think it's easiest to work with highways. So I'm going to upgrade all of this for now. And then I think I basically want to send this straight until about here. I'll make sure that the height's the same, and then I want to use just the continuous tool to create a 180-degree angle like this one. And then it'll ultimately connect in like this. But here's the thing. This is pretty awkward right now. The heights are all off, and I'm just going to adjust these by hand. And this all looks pretty good, but I think that it could be even better. So I'll give a dedicated lane to right-hand turns right here. And then I'm going to convert this all to be alleyways. Now we just have to remove some signals and do a little bit of traffic control. And then finally, in an acknowledgement that freight traffic is going to be the primary user here, I decided to make this intersection right here much larger to allow for more sweeping movements and make this lane right here a nice sweeping movement into Segunda Beach Boulevard. So I think that that's a good change. Couple more changes. This should not be a gigantic bridge structure. So we'll imagine that this was not a part of the remediation site. And then for the rail yard, I want to add a bit of parking. So I think I'm going to add that right about here. And that looks pretty darn good in my opinion. So we make our way over here where we have two things we need to add. Our big park right here, and then I want to add an elementary school right here. Now for the park, we're just going to add in a small playground, maybe off in the corner, as well as one of these outdoor gyms. And honestly, I might just grab them both and pull them both over here. And then have paths do most of the lifting. And I think I'll leave this area completely wide open so that we can have trees and grassy areas where people could just hang out. Now for this elementary school area, we've got a lot of terrain to work with, and we've got to back this road off a bit as well. Now I will add this road back in here, but we've got to do a little bit of site preparation and place our elementary school first. So I'm going to add a retaining wall right here and right there, and then do a little bit of grading. And then I think I want to go with the Eastern European Elementary School if I can make that thing fit in here. And with a bit of creativity, I absolutely can, but we've got some issues. First, this is a fairly long cul-de-sac. So I am going to connect this road right here. And then we've got an issue right here with our road connection. This is into our parking lot. There's no way to access it right now. Thankfully, invisible car paths to the rescue. I'll snap on and connect to the end of this cul-de-sac, and it looks like it didn't make the connection. And I take that back, it did. I just wasn't recognizing it. But either way, that was an opportunity to make this look a little bit nicer, and I think that that turned out really well. But here's the thing. We're encroaching upon the highway just a little bit, so I think that we've got to do something to improve this. Let's get rid of that fence, and then we'll also add a sound barrier so that the kids can actually enjoy going to school. And in my opinion, that looks pretty darn good. So let's switch gears and focus on our last area. And the first thing I want to build is the public housing. And you might not think of this as a traditional city service, but at one point it was. Here's the thing. We know at this point that it's not good to concentrate poverty or build these sorts of public housing complexes, but that doesn't mean that they don't still exist. So let's build two of them. And thankfully, we've got the perfect asset for this. We just haven't unlocked it, and we're probably never going to. And that's King Leno's absolutely amazing Imperial Heights Apartments. And I'm going to add two of them. Now, if you've never placed these assets, they're really interesting in that they have a whole bunch of households, 720 in this one and 720 over here. Now, for this asset, it has no parking, so I added a parking lot behind it. This one has one built in, but I mean, 720 households and that parking lot, you can imagine this is not going to be sufficient. We also had these surfaces blobbing around a bit, so I cleaned it up. I think that we could probably do the exact same thing with the sidewalks. Perfect. And my goodness, look at all the crazy parking around here. Now, the other thing I want to add is an elementary school. That's going to go right here. We don't have a ton of space for this one. So we're going to go for our small elementary school, which should fit this location, but it doesn't provide all that much capacity. And then finally, we'll add sound barriers once again. And then lastly, we're supposed to have a park right here. So this isn't going to be anything elaborate, but I will add a basketball court right here, as well as a small playground. And then a small walking path. And then eventually maybe we'll add picnic tables or something like that in this area right here. And there's one more city service that we haven't placed, and that is a transit route. We're going to add that at the very end after we add our land uses. So with all of our city services in place, let's move on to zoning. Now let's keep it real. If I were to attempt to plop all these buildings to make them look as good as they could, it would take me forever. So I want to do a hybrid plopping. I'm going to zone everything in and adjust things as needed, block by block. So let's start up here by the high school. And the first thing I want to do is use zoning controller to very deliberately control zoning. I'm going to get rid of all of the zoning along Honeybrook Street, and then also remove it in targeted areas. And that's just about perfect. So I'll begin with my single family homes. And I only had to plop a couple of buildings all right here. Next, let's place our higher density residential. And I'll add some southwestern row homes right here. And right here, as well as right here and right here. And then we'll step up into some southwestern medium density. And I'm going to try to just zone the entire block and see what happens. We get some larger buildings. That's what I was hoping for. And then I'm again extending those row homes down here. And then I replaced some of these single family homes because they were 4 units deep, and the 4 unit deep buildings for the southwestern single family homes end up spawning a bunch of carriage lane homes. And I just didn't want that to happen in these areas. Now that's all looking really good, but we need some commercial. Now, interestingly, I think I've oriented the commercial inappropriately. It's supposed to all be focused on this road. So there are a couple of things I want to do. I think I'm going to take this road and upgrade this. So I've added parallel parking there, and then I want to remove the zoning on here if I can, and it's not going to let me, but I can add it back here. And ultimately that just means we have to go vanilla. Now for the commercial here, I do not want to go with the southwestern assets because they look very, very, very suburban. So instead, I'm going to use a mixture of the northeastern USA and the Japanese assets. Now, let's just keep it real. This isn't it. This didn't work out at all. We got the same couple of assets over and over, and they are completely in different scales. Let's go back to the drawing board. And I do think that we're just going to have to plop the commercial. There's just not a great way to do this without plopping, at least in my opinion. And I think that if we take a look at the assets, we can see why this wasn't working. There aren't all that many assets. Even if I select the southwestern and the northeastern that are 4 units deep, we've only got these ones in the level 1, and a bunch of them are hotels. So let's select manually what we want. And I feel like this works much nicer. Kind of an interesting mix of uses through here. Some repetition, but it's the kind of repetition that from street level looks pretty darn good. The only thing that's not really working for me here is a couple of these locations where we have, drive-through access right here that just doesn't look all that natural. So I'll just spin that thing around, remove the fence, and have the primary vehicle access not coming from Castlewood right here, but rather from Hickorywood. And then I'm also going to take this parking and convert it just to be an alleyway. And this also means that we have kind of a tricky situation right here on our couplet. So I'll try to just zone 2 by 2 and then add some alleyways. And then next to that, we're supposed to have some offices. We'll do the exact same thing here. And that brings us to our couplet where we're supposed to have primarily mixed use zoning. So I'm going to try my best to go with USA Southwest mixed housing and just kind of load this entire area in with zoning. We'll see what happens. And while all of those are filling in, we're going to load up these two with zoning. And these are going to be more challenging because they're awkward parcels with weird broken zoning grids. But this one right here is supposed to be commercial, and this one is supposed to be residential. So I'm just going to clone this building and place it a couple more times. And then pull that parking through as well. And then for the commercial, I'm just going to take this 3-unit commercial building right here. I'll place one of them and then the 2x2 right next to it. And then for the area south of the couplet, we have some interesting things happening. So right here, we have our commercial core leading into our high school. This shifts a block over because our node of activity is right here at the end by our park. So this is our commercial core here. So none of these uses are going to be oriented towards this street, but over here, they all will be. So knowing how difficult it was to grow these, I'm just going to place a number of these down here. Now we'll add in our mixed use. I'll try to grow in the bit of commercial that we're supposed to have right here in our couplet. And then again, add in our medium density, which up here will just be our medium density homes. And right here will be some row homes. And before we load things up with single family, there are 2 more unique districts. We need offices right here. And I think I'm just going to place some vanilla office buildings. And then right here, we have a spot of commercial. And I'm going to go with the southwestern commercial. So we'll get some auto-oriented commercial right here. And actually, I'm going to specify one of them. We absolutely have to have a grocery store in this neighborhood. So I'll plop that myself right here. And then I'll select the building for the lot behind it. And I think something like that will be perfect. Now, we still have a few gaps in here. These are commercial that I've zoned in that haven't spawned in. I just want to see why these aren't filling in. Looks like it's local demand. I'm going to try to stimulate demand just a bit. And I'll drop the tax rate for commercial down to 8%. At the same time, I'm going to add in all of that residential. With the exception of those couple of gaps, this looks really good in my opinion. So let's switch gears and focus on this area. And the first thing I want to do is add a road right here. And the whole reason I'm adding that road is so that we can add a whole bunch of warehousing underneath the tracks right here. And I think I want to focus on some of this agricultural storage. This is a little bit shorter and I think it'll fit underneath the tracks. So I'll place one temporarily so that I can add the road behind it. And then I want to go with something that's not quite so deep so that it's not completely backing up to this road. And then I've added a bit of lumber storage right here. Moving up the hill, this is going to be predominantly residential with the exception of this area right here where I want to have a grocery store. So I'm going to plop that first. And again, that's just a 6x6 Southwestern USA commercial building. And as I was placing this, I realized that this road shouldn't just go straight down the hill. It should probably follow the contour lines, go along the base of the hill, and then connect up right here. That gave me the ability to flatten this out a bit and even add a bit more commercial right here. I'm probably not going to do much of anything right here, but I do think that having this right here would make a ton of sense. And in fact, there is one slight modification I want to make. I added in a gas station, which I think would be a very good use for this location. They would love all the cars going right past it. So let's fill in the rest of the neighborhood. And I think for the row homes over here, I'm going to mix things up and go with some northeastern medium density row homes, get a different vibe for this area. And then again, I'll fill the rest in with the southwestern USA low density. Now, we have an interesting situation here. These homes are actually way above the highway. I added a sound wall anyway to try to prevent some of that noise from spilling over, but we're going to probably need a fairly substantial landscape buffer to finish the job off. So that brings us to this long road. And I think I'm not going to put anything on this side of the road. I didn't do it over here as well because we're not developing the hill just yet, but that is a part of the long-term vision of this area. But for the time being, it just doesn't make a heck of a lot of sense because we would want to develop all the flatter areas first. And reasonably, these aren't even all that flat. Anyway, to make this work, I'm just adding a bit of space in between these homes, and that provides enough separation that these homes don't look completely crazy after they've developed. And then finally, we have the area along Commerce Boulevard. And before we can develop this, we're gonna have to bury our high voltage line. So I'll eliminate that temporarily. And then I'm gonna add a pedestrian path where I want this line to go. And the main reason I'm doing that is because you can't develop on top of a high voltage line. So oftentimes you'll see paths or things of that nature placed on top of there, considering that is a way to not only denote where the high voltage line would be, but also use up that valuable land with something that would benefit the general populace. So I'm gonna more or less try to mirror this. And that leaves us space to add some more auto-oriented uses right here, some offices right here, and then more auto-oriented commercial right along Commerce Boulevard. And then there are just two more places to zone. The first is right here. We're gonna add some more auto-oriented commercial. And the final is across the road where we're gonna add some more warehousing. Perfect. And with that, all of our zoning's in place. So let's move on to adding transit. For the time being, I think we're only gonna have one bus route serving this area. It's gonna basically go from downtown to this neighborhood and then turn back around. So I think I wanna begin by just adding one bus stop, and I'll add that right here in front of the school. And then we're gonna draw our line. So I'll just start it here, then go straight to the transit center. And then I'm gonna add a stop right back here. So this will get the route moving. And the whole reason I want to do that is I want to figure out the best locations for this. And I'm going to do that with waypoints. And then as I go through this, I'm going to add my stops. And these should have fairly high utilization. So I'm going to add a shelter right away. And this one serves these offices plus these apartments. And I'm going to add one down here as well. And then we'll go a couple blocks down. And these will just be signs. And then we'll go a ways down because there's really not anything to stop for over here. We are going to have a stop by the grocery store though. Generally with a bus route, you want to make sure that you have a stop at a grocery store if you can. And I'll add a shelter here as well. And then our bus bays are just gigantic. So I'm going to fix that by adding a temporary path right here and a temporary path right here. And then I'll just add trees to the side of the road on one side of the path. And then remove that path and we're able to shrink up our bus bay. And then from here, we're going to increase our bus stop density quite a bit. And there we go. Lots of stops in the densest part of town. And I ended up removing this stop because it's really only 2 blocks, 3 blocks to get to the high school. That's walking distance. So now I just want to look at the other part of the bus route, the part that goes through Segunda Beach, to see if there are any stops that we can connect in with. And it seems like there's not much of anything. So I'm going to add a stop right here just to provide a little bit more service. And with that, this route is complete. So let's get it named and adjust the number of buses on the route. And the funny thing is, I don't have a name for the new neighborhood, so I can't really name the route. So if you have a name for the neighborhood, drop it in the comments below. For the time being, we'll just call it the new neighborhood route. And I'm going to drop the number of vehicles down to 3. So hopefully we have enough vehicles for the route. That looks like it did the trick. And you see the situation at this bus stop right here? This is what I was worried was going to happen. We're going to have to keep an eye on this route. It's doing a lot. There's a lot of people served by the route. And I have a feeling that we're going to likely need to add additional capacity here in the future. But for now, we're going to leave it as is. So with our new bus routes in place, let's move on to adding communication services. Now, we've already addressed some of the communication services in this area by adding the post office, and this thing's doing just fine. But there are 2 things that we didn't do. we didn't add the internet, and we didn't add any mailboxes. So I'm going to start out with the internet, and you can see that there is no coverage in this area at all. Now, we do have the radio mast, and I could add that, and obviously I could add that right in the center right here. We're supposed to have commercial. That's not going to be great. I think I want to make it feel realistic and add it to the top of the hill. And you can see it seems like the service even improves a little bit until we start covering the rest of Segunda Beach, which is definitely in need of more service. I think that we should probably add either the Japanese radio mast, which has a much larger coverage area, or maybe even unlock the telecom tower. Maybe that's the play. So let's go ahead and do that. It's only 4 development points and we have 92 available. And oh yeah, this does a ton. This is massive for us. I'm gonna add this right at the top of the hill up here, I think. And that provides service not just to our new neighborhood, but also to the rest of Segunda Beach. So now we have to find a way up here. And that honestly wasn't all that bad considering we're already almost all the way up here. But it can be improved. All it needed was a little bit of movement. We were able to make this thing look absolutely perfect. We've got some weird stuff happening over here. So we won't be afraid to call a bit of a mulligan. Now, the thing about the telecom tower is that it has no upgrades. And I can't help but think this coverage is pretty good, but we could make it exceptional if we add one more tower. So I think I'm going to add the small radio mast right next to it. And the fun thing about this one is that it actually has some upgrades. So I want to see if we can make this an even deeper shade of green. So I'll increase the bandwidth. Oh, and that is nice. And I'll also add the wireless network antenna upgrade, which increases the coverage area. And I honestly can't tell the difference. But there's one more thing that we have to do with communications. And again, that is add in our mailboxes. And funny enough, it looks like our coverage is pretty good, but I'll add a couple of these anyway. And those seem like fairly rational locations for these neighborhoods. Not on major arterials, but within close proximity of everything. So with our communication services in place, let's move on to landscaping and detailing. Generally, I want to go through every single asset and make sure that every block fits as nice as it can, make sure that we've got lots of buffering where it makes sense, make sure that our remediation site looks like a remediation site. I want to figure out a way to deal with all the cars near the public housing, and also add capacity to that school over there because it's completely filled up. And that's a lot, so let's just jump right in. after about 3 hours of detailing, our neighborhood is complete. And honestly, I am really proud of this neighborhood. I think that it's turned out really, really well. Couple of interesting things that I want to highlight. I decided to switch this park's design up. Initially, I thought that I'd have it kind of be the vista point here, but it just didn't really fit well. And I felt like rotating it around utilized the space a bit better. I went through every single block down here and tried to make sure that they all made sense. I think that the layout is much nicer. Some of these have started to level up and I'm not sure that I love the size of them, but it's going to be fine. Sometimes you just got to let it go. And this is the vanilla behavior. This is what is supposed to be happening. Moving over here, I decided to really go ham on this plaza, and it's unrecognizable at this point, but people walk through here, and honestly, this would really be an important community amenity, a place that people go to every single week if they live in this neighborhood to grab a bite to eat, take in a show, and just meet with their friends. Now, as far as the blocks in the neighborhood go, every single one has trees, every single one has had its homes adjusted, and every single one feels really special. Our trailhead is working. People are walking up and down this little path that goes into Lake Segunda State Park, which to me makes this feel really, really special. Moving on to our remediation area, which we're going to be checking out the amount of pollution remaining in here shortly, I decided to kind of go and make this feel like this is an active work site. I added a lot of fencing around here. I added some diggers and excavators, dump trucks, and then piles. And I used different types of riverbed textures to try to give it a little bit more variety, make it feel like some of this has been dug up or placed in here recently. And then moving on to the neighborhood on the hill, I did a little bit less over here. I decided to leave this a little bit more sparse, a little bit more of the vanilla propping, but I still tried to make it feel uniform with the rest of the city. At this point, we have surfaces all over the place. We've got a lot of landscaping, and I wanted to carry that through. And wherever we had hillsides, I planted lots and lots of trees so that it didn't feel quite as bare. Now, there are a couple of spots like this where things are bare. That's because we don't have commercial demand that is significant enough to have this parcel fill in naturally. So we're just going to wait. And there's a couple of spots like that, and that's completely fine. And then we move on to our housing projects, where I've decided to add in a couple of parking ramps, not very realistic, but reasonably. It soaked up some of that parking need, and we actually have empty parking spots for the first time in a long time. The other thing that I've done over here is I've grabbed a bunch of these offices and just placed the same asset next to each other. To me, it looks a lot more uniform and a lot more like what I'd expect to see in an office area like this. I also replaced the elementary school over here, placed a nicer school. This school is not completely full. It's darn close though, but this is, I think, probably the best fit for this area. I went through a number of assets, and ultimately this is the only one that fit reasonably well. And then finally, I decided to use that pedestrian path that has the high voltage line underneath it as a retaining wall right here and a key wall right here. It was just a way of cleaning up the landscaping and defining this area a little bit. And honestly, I think it turned out really well. So with all of that complete, there's only one more thing left to do. Let's take inventory of what we've done with a brief city tour. we wrap things up for the day, there are two things that I want to do. The first is I want to take a look at our bus route because things are not going well. There's a lot of people at just a couple of these stops, so I think that we've got to go back to the drawing board and add a couple of buses here. Now it says that our line usage is only 107%, so that might make you think we just got to add one bus and we'll be in a good place. But I'm looking at these individual stops, and when I see that we've got 180 people here, 105 here, 173 here, we really need significantly more capacity. So for the time being, I'm going to bump this up to 6, and I happen to know that we don't have enough vehicles for this. So I'm going to see if I can remove any buses from these other routes, such as Mall to Harbor, which only has 19% utilization. I'll take that down to 2. For this super long regional route, I can absolutely remove some capacity here. We'll take this one down to 7. And with that, I should have enough buses for this route now. So I'll let this run for a few minutes and see where things shake out. And after watching this for a few minutes, things have definitely improved, but I think it needs even more capacity. We still have a couple of these stops that have over 100 people queued up or close to it, so I'm going to bump this up to 9. And after just a couple more minutes, we've completely cleared out our queues. Now, you might think seeing 51% capacity, we should remove some buses, but I think it's important to keep in mind the time of day. It's currently 2 a.m., and as a result, we're using 50% capacity in the middle of the night. You can imagine that during the peak periods, we're going to need those 9 buses. So I'm not going to respond to what I'm looking at right now. I'm going to respond to what I saw earlier and leave the route as is. It's completely functional. And then the final thing I wanted to do today was take a look at our remediation site and see what the pollution levels are looking like. And would you look at that? We're completely clear over here, and it looks like we're still getting some from this aggregate mine, but it's receding. So it's looking like we should be able to build on this in short order. But ultimately, that'll have to come in a future video because for today, we're going to leave it here. And I really hope that you've enjoyed this one. If you did, please hit the like button. If you're not subscribed to the channel, please consider doing so. And I want to thank you so much for your time today. There's a million things you could have been doing, but you decided to hang out with me and remediate an industrial site. And for that, I appreciate you and I appreciate your time. This has been a really fun build for me, and I hope you enjoyed it as well. Take care. Bye-bye.